Welcome back to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast. We are so glad you're joining us again today. We have an incredible guest, Chris Woods. He's a certified professional coach, the author of the book. Hold your pants tight here now, guys. Balls and Brains: A Framework for Living Your Best Life by Overcoming Fears and Maximizing Strengths. Balls and Brains is a no-nonsense, actionable guide for people seeking to break free from those self-imposed limitations and step into their fullest potential. Chris combines personal storytelling, psychological frameworks, and practical exercises to help his readers overcome fear, i.e., balls, and maximize their innate strengths, i.e., brains. This isn't just another self-help book. It's actually a roadmap for those who are tired of playing small and ready to lead with courage and clarity. Chris brings decades of experience as a four-time global C-suite executive, former Google sales leader. He's led at scale, made high-stakes decisions, lived inside the pressure that comes with responsibility and ambition. And if you want to know where he's coming from, he rose up from the rough upbringing in the tough area of Boston, the original Goodwill Hunting. At 40 years old, Chris flatlined in a hospital bed, and that moment forced him to confront not just his health, but how he was defining success and the internal fears driving his choices. It changed everything. Today, he coaches from lived experience, not textbook theories. He helps leaders and professionals align who they are with what they do, so success feels energizing instead of exhausting. Be sure and check out his website where you can find a link to the book, Balls and Brains, and more information about his coaching services, as well as testimonials from very happy coaching clients. Chris, welcome to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast, dude. We are so glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Pat. I really appreciate you bringing me on, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, this is going to be a blast. We'll get to the C-suite and high stakes and all that exhausting being at the top of your game type deal. But I want to know, because everybody wants to know, flatlined in a hospital. What's the Paul Harvey rest of the story behind that?
Yeah, so I grew up in Boston. I'm the youngest of five, and my dad died when I was 2. He died actually at 40 years old. So I always had this sense that I was going to go early as well. So I always told people that that's what drove me, and I really worked for building an obituary more than a resume. So at 40 years old, while I was working for Google, I was on a semester break because I was also going to Harvard, and I got bitten by a tick in my back while I was doing yard work and ended up contracting cardiac Lyme disease. I was rushed into the hospital over the course of 16 hours or so. I eventually flatlined in the bed, and they brought me back. They called Code Blue, brought me back with the paddles after I had flatlined for 1 minute and 4 seconds. And they said, Mr. Woods, do you know what just happened? And I was like, no. And they told me what happened. They kept me in the hospital for a couple of weeks to run a bunch of tests. They diagnosed the cardiac Lyme disease, was able to eradicate it with treatment, as well as installed a pacemaker in my chest. So they told me that I should be good for the next 50 years now that I have this. And that's what ended up happening. I was like, okay, that's great. What do I do with the next 50 years? So that's what kicked off the whole kind of transformation and the framework I now use in my coaching practice.
Wow. What a comment. Building an obituary and not a resume. Yeah. I teach people to have a life sentence, write down what you want people to say in one sentence, what you want them to say about you at your funeral. I'd never thought of it in terms of while you're alive, are you building, what's that story? You're the year you're born, the year you die, or the dates, and then there's that dash in the middle. Yeah, and that's the important thing. But what a sobering experience to realize and admit to yourself you're building an obituary and not a resume. Man, so let's talk about pre-flatlining. What was Chris Wood's life? What were you that high drive thing? What was going on?
So what I realized upon reflection afterwards was that I was really running on fear, and outwardly it looked like it was working, right? So I had the career and married with two daughters, and seemingly had everything going very well. But what I realized upon reflection was I was always running on fear from the moment I woke up to the time I went to bed at night. It was really like, oh gosh, what tragedy is going to happen today that I need to deal with? And I didn't know any better. It was just the way that I grew up, and no one ever wanted to hear me complain. And I was just like, all right, this is just the way things are, and this is how I live. So I didn't really know it. I kind of knew it didn't really feel right, but I said that this is what I need to do. And then being given another 50 years to live, not only that, time in the hospital, but then once I was released, it gave me a time to take a look at, like, what do I want to do differently? And it made me recognize that my thought patterns and actions were all fear driven. And I was like, wow, life could actually be better if it weren't so fear driven.
So what'd you do next? Obviously you come out of the hospital. I'm assuming some recovery time at home, or did you just jump right back into Monday morning, go back to work?
No, it took some recovery time. That's what they needed me to do, particularly to let the pacemaker surgery, take hold. When I went back, I had already been engaged with an executive coach at Google. Once you reached a certain level, you were given an executive coach. So when I came back and re-engaged with her, she really helped me. And one of the things that she did was, I had never taken a Clifton's Strength Finders. I'm not sure if you've taken it or your audience have, but it's an online diagnostic that takes about 40 minutes to go through and answer a bunch of questions. And it gives you a feedback of your top 5 and your top 10 strengths mapped against like 64 possible strengths. And within that, in the top 5 as well as the 10, it really, draws out the parts of you and your skill set and what you can be doing more, and like where you're best fitted for all of these, and what you should be doing. And when I was able to map that against what my current job was at Google 5 or 6 years into it, it wasn't the same as it was when I first started. So when I got there, Google was still growing. It was before they had bought YouTube, and it was still a little bit entrepreneurial. And then over those course of those years, bought YouTube and then bought a bunch of other things and scaled and became really big. So as you then were promoted, jobs were very defined, as opposed to you were able originally to join and kind of come up with things on your own. And so my Strength Finders was telling me that I was best served in entrepreneurial as well as turnaround environments, as opposed to, giant corporate structures. And that actually resonated with me, and what really felt good. So that's what kicked off what I ended up doing post Google. So I originally started off and launched a CEO consulting business, and then got recruited by investors to go turn around investor-backed companies. And I did that 4 times. So I don't think I would have either had the courage to do it or the clarity to do it if I didn't end up taking that Clifton Strength Finders, and then had been open to saying, you know what, I actually want to pursue the things that feel right to me.
Wow. So here's a curiosity question, because I'm like, I had some stuff. I'm like, oh, I'm going to ask these questions and whatnot. But I told you when we talked on the phone, it's very organic. I'm curious to make that switch from Google with the guaranteed paycheck and benefits and all that kind of stuff, and switching over into an entrepreneurial, self-employed kind of environment. One, what were some of the, I don't know, fears and obstacles that you had doing, because you were married and had kids at this? I mean, when you made this switch? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, how'd your wife take it?
Well, the good news is the jobs all still paid very well. I mean, you increased your risk, and it wasn't just kind of like what they say, if you get to a big company like that, you can choose to rest and vest, right? So you just stay there for the next 20 years and let your options vest.
Retire on duty.
Right. And that just didn't resonate with me. So fortunately, the things that I went to still paid well. If I had stayed at Google for another 20 years, I probably would have had more money in the bank, but it was more like this was going to be both. It was going to provide income, but also let me exercise the things that I'm really good at and get me excited.
So did you walk away from Google and have a book of potential clients, or were you starting from,
Yes.
okay. So a lot of that, I think that's probably one of the biggest fear factors for a lot of folks is, well, I really know what I want to do. I know what I'm really gifted to do, but either I don't want to leave the security of what I got going on with the paycheck, or I don't know how to build a business. So kind of what are your insights if some young 20 something comes to you and goes, "Hey man, I took that strength finders and I'm really excited and whatnot. I don't know what the hell to do. How do I do this?" What's your best advice?
Yeah. So this comes up a lot. And a lot of times I work with people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And first off, the thing I always say is I preach evolution as opposed to revolution. So revolutions are scary and messy, and oftentimes they don't work. So I discourage people from taking drastic steps that quote unquote blow up their lives. What I rather have somebody do is to get clarity about where, their strengths, as well as we haven't really talked about the fears part of it, the things that hold them back from being able to go all in on who they are. But I always then say is like, let's map a way there so that it's not going to be this extreme thing. And it helps free people, I think, because people in general, but a lot of times guys, myself included, end up thinking they catastrophize. They're like, oh my gosh, if I do this, everything will blow up and everything's over. And I say, let's not do it that way. Let's actually map how you get there. So for example, with somebody there who's either in their early 20s or if they're in their 30s, I say, get a job that has a solid paycheck, do the job there, but then start what you want to do as your side hustle, because you'll make your mistakes and then you'll still have the security of your current gig, but it'll also get you excited because I'm not going to be stuck in this job for the next 30 years and have to just die like Willy Loman. So I end up then saying to them, is whatever age you are, let's actually map the way to get there. And that is a lot smarter than just saying, all right, I'm going to risk it all, because a lot of times that doesn't work. So I'm also reminded of a phrase that we were taught to teach chief marketing officers or chief technology officers when I worked at Google, when we were trying to get them to, to move into new platforms, is we don't want you to blow things up. The whole idea is that imagine if you are swinging in a jungle, right? The way you're getting through is you're swinging from vine to vine. If you're swinging from on one vine and you go to the next one, make sure you've got that next vine firm in your grasp before you let go of the vine you're on.
Yeah.
Right? Because everything goes sideways if you don't. And so that's what I always encourage people to do, is make sure you're still holding on to the vine you're on until you've got a firm grasp on the next one.
Yeah. Because people my age, I'm in my 60s, we grew up, my dad worked at the same place 36 years.
Of course.
And we had that, and they were, Depression era babies kind of deal. And I want to get into the fear thing here in just a second. But in the 70s and early 80s, there used to be this kind of, I can't remember how the exact phrase went, but it was, I'm going to paraphrase it. Just take the leap and figure it all out on the way down, and I'm like, what's that saying? It's not the fall that kills you; it's the sudden deceleration. and I hear your advice of, there's something to be said for getting out of your comfort zone and knowing your strengths and all those. But it's a lot better experience and journey if you have a roadmap. You hear these, the hippies of the 60s and 70s. Oh yeah, just jump in our van and we're just going to do a road trip. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not anal about scheduling, but I want to know.
Sure, you want to plan.
Yeah, and what's the other expression? Was it 7 P's? Prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance. So that's great advice. Now let's get into that that fear factor. I always say there's two definitions of fear. One's healthy, one's not. The unhealthy one, which many of us, and if you're Irish, I mean, like genetically, like I am Irish, our philosophy, I think it's in our DNA as, hey, just ignore a problem long enough and maybe it'll go away on its own, and or you just want to forget everything and run. To me, that's fear, as opposed to face everything and respond, not react, but respond to.
Love that.
Through.
So I'm sorry, Pat, you froze about 5 seconds ago after you were saying about face everything and rise and respond.
Yeah, for some reason, I think we're buffering on our recording here.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll work it out when I
do
the editing. So, so face everything and rise and respond. And that was the last thing we kind of got. Yep. What's next?
So the way that I suggest people approach these things, and as you had said, so I'm also of Irish descent, and so that definitely resonates with me. The whole idea is, just ignore it and eventually it'll go away, but there's a lot healthier way to do it. And I also think that comes in oftentimes with men as opposed to women, because men don't really want to talk about things as much as, women do. And so what I ended up writing that Balls and Brains book is as an invitation mostly for guys to be able to have an accessible way to say, all right, I'm actually going to face these things that are holding me back. And what I always say about this, that it's not about like getting you on a therapist couch. What I say about the balls part of it is to get awareness around what's holding you back from being the authentic version of you. And what I say, what's holding you back from letting it rip? And so for me, one of the things that when I looked at it was like, I was afraid of failing. So I was afraid of once I had achieved, what if I fail? And now I have so much to lose. But then before that, I was like, so what if I don't make it? What if I've already told myself that I'm going to do well? And what if it doesn't happen? And then what if I'm then embarrassed? And what if I end up then, like I mentioned it in my book, is what if I end up so I grew up in the Boston area and I'm a New England Patriots fan. And so they were a dynasty for 20 years, but then Brady left and won on his own. And then things all went, pear-shaped when Belichick was there, and then he got fired. And then, ended up being that people were like, wow, I guess Belichick wasn't even that good. I guess it was all Brady. And so I didn't want to be the guy that oh, he left and I guess it was all Google. It wasn't him, so there were all sorts of fears that hold you back. And I just started to confront them and said, I don't want to then be at the end of my next 40 or 50 years and to feel like I got a second chance, but I let fear hold me back from going all in and living an authentic life. And to me, it wasn't then I was taking a vow of poverty. It was more like I still want to be successful, but I want to do it on my own terms.
Wow. And that, and I want to just kind of tag into that a little bit, that some people would not actually identify this, what I'm about to say, as coming from a perspective of fear. But we have been given, particularly men, been given some really crappy advice growing up. And the two that strike me over my career, professional career, that struck me the hardest was, if you want it done right, do it yourself. And I think that falls into that fear of failure category, but it's a mindset that you got to get over and put it aside. The other one is the saying, suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
And how that is actually self-defeating, because it tells you not to do that self-reflection and look for areas that you may not want to call them weaknesses, but areas that you need to improve on. And I didn't learn that lesson about if you want it done right, do it yourself, and the suck it up buttercup until I was pushing 40. I was a sergeant on the police department, and my lieutenant called me in, and I had a squad that was working for me. We worked 8 at night to 6 in the morning, and he had my annual performance evaluation. And one of the things was, not greatest strength, but strong point. And he wrote leads by example. And then on the next line, it says area that needs improvement. And he wrote leading by example. and he goes, Bruce Burt was his name. He goes, Pat, do you understand what I mean by that? And I go, sir, I have absolutely no idea. And he goes, you're thinking that you're leading by example is actually doing somebody else's job for them. And because he didn't use the word you fear to fail, but he goes, you think you have to always be out there doing everything so your troops will say, hey, he's leading from the front kind of deal. In reality, you're training them, hey, I don't have to do anything. The sergeant will take care of that call, or something along those lines. So what are some mechanisms or tools that you use to actually get people, men and women? And I know for men, we're thick-skulled at times. What are some tools and things that you do to get them to internalize everything you're talking about? Because you can't make somebody be a leader or make somebody do things if they really don't want to do it. They have to internalize that.
So it's not going to work if they don't really want to do it, right? So the whole idea of the people that I work with, they're either come to me through their companies, so that their corporations have put them into executive coaching, or they're individuals who are friends with someone else I worked with, and they hear good things and they end up coming. And so they already have that intention and at least some motivation. But you bring up a really good point, because I do this 5-step program, and the last 2 of the steps is really where the rubber meets the road. And I'll just do it real quickly. So the first part of it is the fears, to find out what's holding them back from being all in on themselves. The second thing is understanding their strengths, right? Whether it's Clifton Strength Finders or going through performance reviews and these other things, and then mapping against how much of it are they actually doing. And if they're not, can we evolve the job, or is there another job down the road that they want to start moving towards? And after we've done those first 2 steps, the third step is resetting their goals. So now let's reset the goals that you have over the next month, 6 month, year, 5 years, based on now understanding what the fears were that were holding you back, and the strengths that you have that you should be playing full offense on instead of playing defense on your weaknesses. So we're now at steps 4 and 5, and this is where it really gets hard. Step 4 is mindset. And you mentioned it. It's like, how do you then get that internalized into people's heads so that they need to be able to change the way that they're interpreting and looking at the world and looking at their day-to-day. So that ends up being a good amount of work that I do with people, that we don't just jump into that, right? That we've built up to that point, and they're committed. They're like, all right, I know I need to change on these things. But what happens is I'm only with them, an hour a week, and they're with themselves 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's working with them and an ongoing check-ins that you're going to fall down, but it's like, that's the stuff we need to work on. And then lastly is habits, right? So mindset is kind of a thought habit, but also the habits, the things that you're going to do every day, because you have all the plans in the world or all the best intentions, but unless you start changing the way that you're operating on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis, it doesn't matter. Nothing's actually going to change. So that ends up becoming where the rubber meets the road. And often that's where people have the hardest time, is those last 2 parts of it, is because you get all excited about, uncovering strengths and fears, and I'm ready to do this, and now I have all these goals, but I can't give you a pill, and I can't hypnotize you. It's like, you need to actually do that work, but I'm here to help them.
Wow. And one of I'm picturing this as you're sharing it, because it reminds me of, when I never had an executive coach. Like you, I'm a certified coach. And I want you to talk in a minute, the difference between coaching and mentoring someone, because they're two different things. But I picture, as you're talking, this is the way I learned to conceptualize what you just shared. Everything begins with the thought, and your thoughts become, you have settled ways of thinking. Your thoughts become attitudes. And to give a real quick example, you have a 4-year-old and you go, for the first time, you're serving green beans with dinner. And your 4-year-old goes, I don't like green beans. I don't want to eat them. You've never tried them. Well, I don't like them. And you go, you, the parent, I don't like your attitude. And what you're saying is, I don't like your behavior because I can't read your mind. But up here, you're thinking something. What and how you're thinking doesn't make sense in a way, to me as the parent. Well, so your thoughts become your attitudes, your settled way of thinking. Your attitudes are displayed in behaviors. Repeated behaviors become your habits. And then habits become what you expect and accept from yourself. Well, the same thing is true about your organization, is all that, how your people and what your people think become attitudes, become behaviors, become habits, become the culture of your organization. What you expect of each other and accept. So what are that somebody listening today could go, you could say, well, here's one of the ways to start digging into how and what you think. What are some tools, whether it's journaling or, how do you get somebody to intentionally make those steps and then have the behaviors that show you as the coach, okay, they're not blowing smoke. They're actually, executing those skill sets.
Sure. So you mentioned it. One of the first things I have people do is to start a journal and, call it a judgment journal. And it's like, when you are interpreting things, when things are happening, let's just keep it confined to work. When things are happening, tell me what happened. And then what was your thought around it? So one of the frameworks that I teach in the book, particularly around fear, is this TEA. So thoughts, emotions, and actions. So for example, when I was at Google and as I was rising up, sometimes I'd be given the opportunity for new projects. And when I started to get higher up in the organization, my first thought was, oh boy, what if I screw this up? And so the thought, instead of it being like an opportunity, I was like, oh my gosh, this is potentially scary because this could then, quote unquote, expose me. So that was the thought. The emotion was then anxiety. And I was like, oh boy. And then the action was avoidance or procrastination or ways that I could get around it. And so what I then ended up seeing in myself on that was like, wait a minute, I'm thinking about this the wrong way. So when I see these see it instead as an opportunity. So the thought then, instead of it is like, oh boy, I could screw this up, the thought instead is, oh boy, this is exciting. This is an indication that they trust me and they think that I'm doing a great job. And this could get me even more, good press and could get me, further, alignment in the organization. So then the thought is that, instead of the thought of, oh boy, this is going to go wrong, the emotion is then excitement. And I was like, yeah, this actually feeds into what I want to do. So then the action is, heck yeah, let's go. And so once you go through this, you're like, okay, yeah, I could re-see this. So then I would work with myself to make sure that that's what I'm doing. So that's the type of stuff that I then work with people on, but they need to start with an awareness around it. Because oftentimes you've just been running on auto program forever, right? So the first thing is a prompt is, let me have you start paying attention to these things, because you use the thing about using the word response. And that's what I always say, right? The thing I used to say is life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And then I ended up saying, wait, that's wrong. It's actually 90% how you respond to it. Right. So this is where we have our actual power. And so that is the first step in getting people to get some awareness around it, and then show that they can change that programming, but it takes effort. You need to be able to recognize that you're doing it. And it's like going to the gym. The more times that you do it, as you use the word, it becomes a habit. So the habits are not just physical things we do, it's actually thought habits.
Yeah. Because what's the research out there? Something like you have 80,000 thoughts a day and 50,000 of them are negative.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
and
it's the
so,
ego meant to try to keep you safe, right? I mean, that's
yeah.
the whole idea, is that it's meant to keep you safe so that it's always looking for threats or always looking for things that are wrong that it needs to address.
Yeah. And we get so, I think, overwhelmed almost. I'm, I'm kind of not, I'm condensing, um, whatever whoever. I suck at names. The hierarchy.
Yeah, Maslow.
Yeah, Maslow's hierarchy. In reality, it comes down. Your 2-year-old has the same 4 essential things that your 90-year-old grandfather has. We all want safety, security, prosperity, and control in our lives. Those are the 4 big fundamental ones. And it's so difficult for us. And the other thing that we've been taught, we've actually been conditioned to do this, is what is it? Flight, fight, or freeze.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, there's a 4th option, and that is to intentionally respond, not have that emotion-driven reaction, but practice in your mind. What am I going to do as a supervisor when I have to have that uncomfortable conversation with an underperforming employee? Or even worse, what am I going to do when I have a toxic employee? Or you're in your personal life, you're in a toxic relationship. That fear, fight, flight, or freeze is, well, I don't want to talk to him. I'm afraid to talk to him. I don't know what to say. All those excuses. If you start up here going, well, hey, how can I work through that in practice in your head, or whatever. And for cops, I mean, there are cops that listen to the show. They know exactly what I'm talking about. Is when you get a call, a high priority call, and a shooting, an armed robbery in progress, a domestic violence. As you're driving there, you are running through your mind what you're going to do when you get there, and that takes intentional thinking. So I love what you're saying. Now, how do you deal with, because I said we'll get into mentoring a little bit too. How do you deal with that coaching client that wants you to give them all the answers? That tell me what to do, coach. That's not coaching.
No.
Coaches don't tell you what to do.
No, that's absolutely right. So the only way that I do occasionally give in on that is my reactions over the first few times will be to go back on them, like, because they have the answers within. I want them to be able to find it on their own. But I will eventually then say after this, I was like, okay, and I will give the disclosure on it, because listen, you're asking me, but this is based on my experience as this grizzled old veteran. And I'm going to try to give this to you, as if an older brother would, or, would on these things. So I will occasionally do that after I've been asked a few times, as opposed to just like a lot of times, as you said, we're both certified professional coaches. And when you go through those, they're always telling you, do not give them straight up advice, even when they're asking. And so I run my practice the way I want to run my practice. I always say that the way that Jack Nicholson said it in A Few Good Men. I run my unit the way I run my unit. And so like I will occasionally do that when someone really needs it. But I'd say 95% of the time I put it back on them as a way for them to try to find the right answer.
Wow. So who, again, I'm switching kind of gears here. Who's your battle buddy? I mean, you're not the Lone Ranger out here dishing out all this consulting and whatnot. What's your support mechanism? Who do you go to when you're like, shit, I'm having a bad day kind of deal?
Well, first off, God. And then secondly, I do have, my own ongoing executive coach that I lean on. I always say, a doctor needs a doctor. And so, a coach needs a coach. And so I do that. But I'm very much strong in my faith, and, and know that I've got God, and particularly Archangel Michael at my side.
Oh, awesome. that's I do the every morning I take my big old 95-pound German Shepherd Husky out for a walk and put my AirPods, whatever you call them, in, and I use an app. It's a Catholic app, and I do the uh, it's a specific rosary chaplet to Saint Michael every morning, because it's like that in a battle. That's the dude I want, on my side, kind of deal. Whether it's a spiritual battle, or I'm having a battle with my my ego, or temptations and all that kind of stuff. I'm glad to hear you say Saint Michael the Archangel. I mean, he's kind of like the badass of the badasses of angels.
He is. So I keep this. I keep this around my neck here. So this is an Archangel Michael pendant. It's
Yeah.
allegedly the stone that resonates and vibrates along him. So I keep that next to my chest.
Yeah, that's that is awesome. And faith is so important. I find it difficult to understand how people can go through life and not have that foundation, because life is difficult with having faith. I could not imagine facing it and feeling completely alone.
No, I feel bad for those people, and I hope that they find it at some point.
Yeah, and kind of along that line, there's a kid in the Catholic Church last year. He was born in 1991, died in 2006 of leukemia, and born in France, raised in Milan, Italy. And this 15-year-old had this insight from a standpoint of faith. And his name's Carlo Acutis. And at 15 years old, this is one of my favorite sayings of quotes from him or about him. And here was his mindset. We're all born unique, but sadly, many of us die a photocopy of someone or something else. And I thought, man, what a wake-up call for me in my 60s to go, hey, Pat, you don't want to die being, a photocopy of somebody else. Remember growing up, when Nike shoes and Michael Jordan, it was like, be like Mike, and we idolize, Taylor Swift, or, I want to be like so-and-so, when in reality is, no, you're unique and God gifted you. And like you said, it's that doing that strengths analysis. What are the gifts that God has given you?
So Pat, you are saying exactly what I say, right? So this is the reason why I believe that I'm here to do this. It's a quote from St. Francis de Sales, and it's always been one of my favorite quotes. And he said, "Be who you are and be that well, so that you may bring honor to the master craftsman whose handiwork you are." And so my work with helping people, and that's the reason why I wrote the book, right, is the 2 introductory steps, is the fears that we end up building up that hold us back from being the bright shining star that we are put here to be. That's the first thing that dims our light. And then secondly, it's about the strengths. These are the God-given strengths that we've been given. But oftentimes people lose sight of them, and they're like, oh, I got to do this because the job is this, and I need this for the paycheck and all this. And I say, okay, you can do that in the meantime, but let's get back to what you've been gifted with. And let's get you to do more of that, even if it's on outside of work as a first step, because this is what you're here to do, right? You're here first. I want to unburden you from the fears that are holding you back, and then have you lean into the things that you're here. So I really do feel like I'm here to reconnect, my fellow souls to their divine nature.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And it's not just about, the divinity kind of deal. From a very practical approach, when I was 28, I'd been a prosecutor for 4 years. We'd been married 6, had 2 kids. And I came home one evening, and my wife's like, man, you're always in a bad mood and whatnot, and you hate your job. What do you really want to do? And I said, well, I've wanted to be a cop since I was a little kid. And I hadn't thought about it in the terms of, a calling or a vocation or any. I wasn't that mature at 28, and she said, "Well, go ahead, then go do that." But here was her caution. Now she was that deeper thinker, much deeper person of faith than me. She goes, "Is there any way you can do it part time?" To make sure, without quitting your job as a prosecutor, make sure you like it and it likes you, that this is really what you're supposed to be doing. So I made a phone call to a chief of a small township agency, and that I knew, and I said, "Hey, you have auxiliary police officers?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Can you bring me on? Here's what I'm thinking about doing." And he goes, "Yeah." So I did that for a year for $10 a shift. I worked 8 at night or 11 at night to 7 in the morning once a week, Thursday night into Friday morning. And I had permission from the DA's office to do this. And I did that for a year. And I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm called to do. And then
That's
I
smart.
had a 26-year career. So you're not telling people or encouraging people to throw caution to the wind.
Not at all.
Have a plan.
That's
And
a perfect example of Pat.
my wife was smart enough to be the one to go, because otherwise I would have just walked in and quit and then, go take the test and, hope for the best and all that kind of stuff. And it was a very structured plan. And then once I got into law enforcement, I made a personal plan. I was not going to, because I could rock it up because of my education. I would get preference points and all sorts of stuff. I only had to be a street cop for 2 years. I could have made sergeant, tested for sergeant. And I made a commitment. No, I'm going to try and get as much experience as I can. And I didn't even test for sergeant until I'd been on the job 7 years. And then made sergeant. I could have tested up to lieutenant after 2 years. I waited 5, and had that specific structured plan because I there's so much I needed to learn. And that you just can't. Here's another one of my worst sayings you can ever say around me. It is what it is. That's a defeatist attitude kind of deal. And it means, you jump on the lazy river ride and go, hey, it is what it is. I'll go where my path takes me. Well, you're surrendering control. You're surrendering prosperity. You're going to miss so much.
For sure. You know what that reminds me of? I live near the beach here in South Carolina, and I walked the beach, I don't know, a month or so ago, and there were a lot of jellyfish all over the place. I had to step around them. And then since then, I haven't seen any jellyfish. So I was like, I could use Google on my phone. So I'm walking, and I was like, how come you can see jellyfish sometimes and sometimes not? And they were saying that, jellyfish, as you know, have no vertebrae and these things. So they're weak, and they can't self-propel. They have no direction about where they are. So when storms come or tides come, they just go wherever it goes. And I always thought that was an interesting thing, because there were people like that too, who were just like, I'm not going to even decide which way I'm going. I'm just going to let it take me. And that's no way to live.
No, it isn't. It isn't. That's a very good pictorial way of, I could picture, because when we go to Hilton Head, South Carolina, you'd see jellyfish washed up, and I'd never thought of it in those terms, but I can picture that and go, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. How can people reach out and connect with you, want to learn more, get your book, talk to you about maybe being their executive coach?
Sure. So my name is very simple. It's Chris Woods with an S. And always growing up, people were like, that sounds like a fake name. Or if I got stopped by the police when I was a kid and I'd say it's Chris Woods, they're like, that sounds like it's a BS name. So no, it's Chris Woods is my I'm a coach. So my website is just chriswoodscoach.com. And so there you'll see, more details about how I work with people, a lot of testimonials from very happy clients. There's a link there. If you're interested in the book, you take you over to Amazon to get Balls and Brains. And then lastly, there's a way to just message me directly from there, and I respond to every message. So if anything in this, conversation resonated with anyone and they want to reach out, I'd be happy to chat.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, here's kind of my open-ended question. What did you want to share today? And I didn't ask the right question, or we didn't get to it, that you go, man, I don't want to leave without, this parting word of advice or story or insight.
The only thing I'd say is what I think can be massively transformative for people if they're not already doing it is to purposely practice gratitude and do this in the morning and do it at night. And even if you give yourself 3 minutes, is to or maybe even repower your brain to appreciate the things that you have, and you'll start seeing more things to be appreciative of. So for example, in the morning, when I first wake up, I'm like, thank you that I have another day ahead of me. I'm, grateful that the sun is shining. I'm grateful that either my air conditioning's working or my heat's working, depending upon what it is, all these things that I'm grateful for. And I do it, at night before I go to bed. And I truly believe that for people who aren't doing that as a real practice, it can really rewire your brain. Because as you had mentioned earlier, Pat, is that, we're trained often just to be looking for all the things that are wrong. So that we're trying to anticipate issues or problems that we need to solve, or, and we miss what's in front of us. And the more you're actually paying attention to what's good, you'll see more of what's good.
Yeah. And here, I get people push back on that, oh, that's, so, I don't know what the word is, not realistic. It's pie in the sky. And so I tell them, okay, when we get back together next week, I want you to tell me, how many red Volkswagens did you see?
Yeah.
And then they'll come back and I'll ask them, hey, how many red Volkswagens did you see? I had no idea there were so many red Volkswagens in this town, and da-da-da-da. And I go, see, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Whatever you're looking for, you will always find more of it. And I mean, if you want to go scriptural, knock and the door shall be open, ask and you shall receive. It is a fundamental truth. Whatever you're looking for, you will always find more of it. And if you're looking for the worst in the people that you work with, you'll find it. But if you're looking for the best in them, or how I'm looking for the opportunity to best serve the people I work with or who work for me, and all those, you will find those because you are specifically looking for it. And what a great piece of advice that takes intention, but you're guaranteed to succeed.
100%. And it builds you up. It builds the muscle and the habit. We've talked about habits a lot.
Yeah.
And it just builds the habit. And it's the power of habit, right? You can have bad habits if you drink too much, or you don't brush your teeth enough, or you don't clean up your apartment or whatever. There's bad habits, but there's good habits. And this is one that I'm telling you is transformational.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, Chris, this is great. Do you have any more books coming out?
Not as of now, no, but I may launch a podcast of my own. And then I would definitely ask you to be one of my first guests.
Oh, man, you have to do it. It is so, everybody goes, why'd you get into podcasting? And honestly, I got in because I thought, oh, what a fun hobby, do a podcast once in a while. And maybe I'll have a couple hundred listeners if I'm lucky, and they'll all be cops and this, that, and the other thing. Started this thing 15 months ago. I have met fascinating people. I met the grandson of the professional baseball player for the Chicago White Sox who invented the catcher's vest. He invented that, and he was the catcher for the White Sox.
Wow!
And he revolutionized and changed Major League Baseball, because up until that time, the catcher was like in softball, where they'd let the ball bounce and catch it. The umpire calling balls and strikes was standing behind the pitcher, not behind the catcher. And and he revolutionized, because that fear factor of getting injured,
sure,
on a foul ball coming back and hitting you. I never would have met this guy if it had been for podcasting. And I just one of the team leaders from Black Hawk Down, that one of the Army Rangers that helped rescue that guy, never would have met him and heard his story and been inspired, but for podcasting. And we're now in 74 countries, Hong Kong, China, which it's like independent, but it's not a country. So 74 countries, Hong Kong, and we're pushing 8,000 downloads. It has expanded my universe, and it's been so much fun. You have to start your own podcast. You will love it. You'll meet great people, and you will learn so much that you didn't even know about yourself. So
that's amazing. Thank you for that, Pat.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, hey, for our, thank you, Chris, for being here. Again, folks, Chris Woods with an S, coach.com. Reach out to him. Check out his book. I love the title of it, man. It's like, oh, balls and brains. I got to read this just because the title. So for our listeners, man, get that book. If it resonates with you, this episode, share it with people that need to hear it. And thank you for being our loyal, valued listeners. Because of you, we are bringing the warrior servant leader message around the world and making an impact in people's lives. So as I close every episode, I want to remind everybody, always strive, always strive to do the right things at the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons, because that's what warrior servants and leaders do every day, every time. Love you all, and see you next week.